Back when he was a kid, Mike had friends with a typical criminal mindset. One day, under strong peer pressure, the boy gets pushed into scaring some people who are playing basketball. Mike hesitates for a moment, but he grabs the gun and walks in like some gangster. He moves up quietly toward the players from behind a truck and then fires randomly at the wall. Luckily, everyone there runs away and no one gets shot. When his friends see all the commotion caused by Mike, they ditch him and run off to avoid getting caught by the police. Mike turns around hoping to receive some praise for the wild show he just put on, but when he realizes he has been left behind, he also runs away and throws the gun somewhere along the path. However, this isn't the end of his crimes, as this delinquent gets arrested about 40 times even before he can peacefully turn 12, making it a world record. A few years later, in 1979, somewhere in New York, a couple of men are talking about Bobby Stewart's kid named Mike. They mention that the boy has recently been released from a detention facility and that his mother no longer seems to care about him. The two men try to convince an old trainer named Cus D'Amato that Bobby wants him to take care of the kid. Cus, however, does not want to deal with a criminal boy at this stage of his life. But later, when he sees the boy inside the boxing training hall, his opinion quickly changes, and he begins to show real interest in the kid. To understand him better, he gets into a car with him, where Mike Tyson nearly gets both of them sent to the afterlife by driving in the wrong lane and almost crashing into another car. Cus then takes the boy to his house and tells him that this place will now be his new home. However, when he introduces the kid to his wife, the woman responds in a very cold way. It becomes clear that Cus's wife is fed up with his daily habit of bringing in homeless kids and letting them stay there, since he already has around 6 fighters living in the house for free. The old geezer then shows Mike his room and firmly warns him to never go near his ice cream, no matter what happens. That same night, while Mike is trying to sleep, the geezer suddenly barges into the room and starts going on about the difference between a hero and a coward. When Mike finally tries to fall asleep again, the 4 a.m. alarm clock rings and his training begins. Manager Cus starts shaping the young Tyson into a professional boxer and pushes him to work until he is completely exhausted. Along with the long lectures Mike has to listen to from the geezer, Cus also shows him famous boxing matches like those of Rocky Marciano and Joe Louis, so he can learn from them. Mike is taught that the idea of defeat must be completely erased from his mind. Soon, the day of Mike's birthday arrives, and by this time, Camille has finally accepted him and even bakes a cake for him. Every morning before the alarm clock rings, the old geezer comes in and ruins the last half hour of Mike's sleep with some random tips and scoldings, especially when Mike secretly steals his ice cream. As time moves forward, Mike receives the terrible news that his mother has died. Heartbroken, he takes a bus down to Brooklyn for her burial. There, his brother asks Mike if he plans to move back home, but Mike explains that he already has a home now. The next day, he returns, carrying his pigeon cage with him, and sets it up on a tree next to Cus's house, almost as if he is finally settling his life there. Not long after that, a girl his age named Jamie shows up along with her uncle Teddy and pays her condolences for Mike's loss. During this time, Cus teaches the boy that being a professional has nothing to do with money, but everything to do with performing at your best, no matter what feelings are piled up inside you. To restore Mike's spirit, the old geezer even hands him a memento he once received from the legendary boxer Muhammad Ali. Soon it's time for the Junior Olympics of 1982. At the event, the newbie Mike almost wets his pants from the fear of disappointing his manager Cus. However, he fights through that fear and turns it into pure fire, knocking out his opponent before the match can even properly begin. He hits the opponent so hard that the poor guy doesn't get back up for the fight, and doctors are even brought in to check if the guy is still alive. When Cus hears from Teddy that Mike has just set a new junior Olympic record by knocking his opponent out in only 8 seconds, the old geezer completely loses it. In excitement, he even tries to feel the hair on his bald head out of pure disbelief. The geezer gets so happy that he rushes to the kitchen to help Camille with the dishes while hesitantly requesting her that he is seriously thinking about adopting the boy. Unexpectedly, the lady agrees even more quickly than anyone expected. When Mike shows up, the old geezer shares the plan with him, and even Camille cannot hide her smile. Camille calls the boy over and hugs her new kid tightly in excitement, happily telling him that from now on, he can call her mommy. The very next day, Cus brings a few important boxing managers to meet Mike, including Jimmy Jacobs, Bill Cayton, and trainer Kevin Rooney. Sitting together, the old geezer proudly shares how he believes the kid has the guts to become the next heavyweight champion someday. Cus then turns to Tyson and reminds him that as long as he keeps good people like these around him, he will always stay out of trouble. That same night, while riding in a car with his brother, Mike excitedly talks about how he might actually become the next heavyweight champion. His brother, however, shuts him down and tells him to stop daydreaming and snap back to reality. On the way, Mike suddenly spots a few girls and rushes after them into a nearby grocery shop. Inside the store, he completely loses control, violently smashing everything he can find while trying to chase those girls down. He ends up giving the store owners plenty of reasons to think he is causing trouble on purpose, throwing accusations around until they finally call the police. Before the cops arrive, his brother quickly drags him away and forces him to run so they do not get caught. By this point, it has already been 4 days since Mike has completely slacked off from training, and Uncle Teddy shows up at Cuss's place with serious complaints. When Teddy explains that Mike has become nothing but trouble at school for both teachers and younger students, the old geezer stubbornly argues that the school itself is the bad influence and that Mike should be pulled out of there immediately. The two of them get into a heated argument over the matter. All Cuss cares about is seeing his boy become the heavyweight champion one day, while Uncle Teddy insists that Mike must learn discipline and be ready to hold a real job if boxing does not work out for him. Just then, Teddy's sister shows up with yet another complaint about Mike Tyson, which pushes Teddy over the edge. That same night, he storms after Mike with a gun in his hand and threatens him, warning him to never go near Jamie again or disrespect anyone in his family. The next day, the old geezer decides he has had enough and fires Teddy as Mike's trainer, choosing to bring in someone else instead. Meanwhile, the delinquent Mike runs wild under his daddy's protection. As the story progresses, Mike Tyson quickly rises through the ranks, and his winning record gets recognized in newspapers worldwide. However, one day, while Cuss is spectating the match, he suddenly feels unwell and ends up in the hospital. Right after Mike wins the match, he receives the news and rushes over to the hospital. He storms through the hospital doors, shouting Cuss's name again and again, pushing past nurses and even picking fights with anyone who tries to slow him down. After forcing his way through the halls, he finally reaches the room where his adoptive father is lying. Standing beside the bed, Mike desperately begs the old geezer not to die on him, saying that if Cuss leaves him, he is going to quit everything and walk away from boxing. Cuss, however, replies that Mike must keep on winning and threatens him that if he fails, he will come back from the grave and beat him to a pulp. Sadly, the old man does not survive much longer. The loss of the only person who truly guided and cared for him hits Mike extremely hard. In his grief, the young fighter releases all of his pigeons, letting them fly free. After the demise of Cuss, Jimmy Jacobs steps in and takes over the role of Mike's manager. One day, when he notices Mike staring blankly and not paying attention, Jimmy asks him what is wrong. Mike quietly admits that he misses Cuss deeply, and the tough fighter suddenly breaks down in tears. Jimmy tries his best to lift the boy's spirits and reminds him that he is the big Iron Mike. He keeps trying to cheer him up until the new champion hugs him tightly and finally accepts the reality. The story then shifts to 1986, where Mike takes part in a match against Trevor Berbick in Las Vegas. There, the 20-year-old boy finally wins the World Boxing Council Heavyweight Championship and earns himself the title of the youngest champion in all of boxing. As he is being awarded the title, the famous promoter Don King shows up and quickly poses for photos with the new champion, Iron Mike Tyson. During interviews, Mike dedicates the victory to his late adoptive father and openly praises Cuss in front of the media, reminding everyone that the old man believed in him long before the world did. Later, while studying with Kevin for his upcoming match against Tony Tucker, Mike again and again distracts himself and keeps switching the television to watch a commercial. There, a model named Robin Givens catches his attention, and Mike cannot help but talk about her to Jimmy. He has literally gotten obsessed with her at first glance and even rings her up asking her out. Mike hits the jackpot as the lady agrees and even shows up at his next matchup against the great Tony Tucker, which is held on the 1st of August, 1987. There at the match, the heavyweight champion initially makes a series of blunders as he gets distracted by Robin's presence. However, after the first bell rings, Kevin knocks some sense into him and warns that if he loses the match, he will definitely lose the girl he keeps staring at to Tony Tucker. The thought of his girl being taken away by a rival drives Mike crazy, and he ends up completely destroying his opponent and successfully retaining his title. After the fight, Mike finally gets to spend time with his new crush and even escorts her back to her place. Not long after that, the two secretly get married, and 3 months later, Mike drops the bombshell on his adoptive mother, telling her everything. He even informs her that his girl is now pregnant. On the phone, his mother suddenly starts crying, and when Mike asks what happened, Bill Caton picks up the call and delivers some terrible news. It turns out that Jimmy Jacobs is no more and has finally lost his battle with leukemia. The news devastates Mike as he loses one of the very few people he truly trusts. He flies back to California to attend Jimmy's funeral, carrying the weight of yet another loss in his life. There, he is approached by Don King, who has also come to the funeral, though clearly with some ulterior motives. Don gets Mike to sit with him, and during the ride, he first praises Jimmy, but as soon as he has Mike's attention, he suddenly starts berating Bill Caton and even nicknames him Satan. Don then tells Mike that that he should not trust Bill and begins tempting him with promises, offering a much bigger amount of money if Mike agrees to come and fight under him instead. Even though the offer is extremely tempting, Mike doesn't accept it, and Don King instead becomes just his promoter. However, Don's words about Bill leave Mike with lingering doubts about whether he can really trust him. This is followed by a huge controversy in the media, where Bill gets dragged into a fight with Don over Mike's future contract. Don has been waiting for this moment for years, and to ensure his victory, he even gets Robin to side with him. Both sides badmouth each other relentlessly, and Bill even threatens to take Don to the Supreme Court, insisting he still has 3 years left on Mike's contract. Meanwhile, Don accuses the contract of being essentially a slave contract for poor Mike, and claims that black people should stick with their own. The story then fast forwards to yet another tragedy as Robin claims she suffered a miscarriage. Next in line is Mike's huge upcoming battle, worth $70 million against Michael Spinks. However, as usual, the reigning champ is slacking off while his training partners gossip about Don King shaking hands with Donald Trump over a deal. They laugh, wondering who is actually getting screwed in the situation. Just then, Mike shows up to resume his training, and Kevin immediately starts scolding him to work harder and stop goofing off. When Kevin learns from Rory that Robin had a miscarriage, he loses his patience again, shouting at Mike to focus while arguing that Robin was never pregnant in the first place and that it was all an act. Hearing this, Mike completely loses his temper and knocks out 2 of his training partners, hitting them with such murderous force that there is no mistaking his intent. 2 weeks later, Mike finally gets to compete against Michael Spinks in New Jersey. Before the match even begins, Caton receives an envelope. He opens it and discovers that he has been fired as a result of Don King's scheming, along with Mike's wife. The 2 undefeated champs step into the ring, and the crowd cheers loudly. Kevin tells Mike that he has to win this for Cuss and Jimmy, and as soon as the match starts, it's clear that Mike has no intention of losing. Spinks takes a number of solid blows until he becomes too serious, but that focus does him no good as he gets knocked out and zones out, losing the match. Everyone celebrates the win, but Bill tells Kevin what has happened, and the 2 look at Mike with sheer disappointment, feeling they have been deceived. Later, during a television interview with Barbara Walters, Robin embarrasses Tyson and claims that her life has been nothing but torture since she started living with Mike. She accuses her husband of being a maniac with serious mental health issues, while Mike sits there, unable to believe what he is hearing. At the end of the interview, she claims that she loves Mike and wants to have little Tysons with him if he gets help for his mental state.
That can't happen if Michael doesn't get help.
Don and his party, watching all of this on TV, wonder if Mike has been drugged to be sitting there like a statue. Later, the cunning woman executes a plan and calls the police. When the police arrive at Robin's home, they find Tyson throwing a temper tantrum. Robin expertly plays the victim, telling the press that Tyson has become an emotionally abusive husband and that she is living in constant fear every day. She even accuses Mike of hitting her on the head, claiming that as a boxer, he knows exactly where to strike without leaving any marks. To make himself feel better, Mike heads over to a bar where women swarm him, seeing him as a free ticket to luxury.
Can I get your autograph?
Yeah, baby.
There, he runs into an old rival named Green, who hurls multiple insults at him. Mike fires back at every single one until Green tells him that his ex-wife Robin is at his place having fun with him. Mike storms after the guy and lands a hard punch, but before things can escalate further, he is forced into his limousine and driven away. The story then jumps a year later to Tokyo, where Mike is scheduled to fight Buster Douglas. As the match progresses, it becomes clear that Mike is just a fading shadow of his former self, having lost direction in his career because of all the personal drama. He performs poorly throughout the fight, taking consistent hits across the ring. During this one fight alone, he takes more punches than in much of his previous career, leaving everyone watching on TV, including Camille, deeply worried. Amid the battle, Mike somehow manages to send Buster Douglas to the canvas, but Douglas quickly gets back up and strikes back. Don King jumps up, arguing that the fight should be stopped since Douglas had been down for over 15 seconds, and this shouldn't be allowed. The match, however, continues, leaving the audience confused as they watch the renowned Iron Mike losing for the first time. Mike's swollen eyelids give him a severe visual disadvantage, and in the 10th round, he is finally knocked out. Camille, watching it all, can't help but cry seeing her beloved Mike being beaten like this. This marks the first defeat of his entire professional career and results in him being stripped of his heavyweight championship title. After the match, Mike remains completely speechless from the loss, while Don King insists on suing the boxing organization, claiming that Tyson should be declared the true winner of the fight, as Douglas had been knocked out for 16 full seconds in the 8th round. Don then turns to Mike and tells him to keep his hopes up, assuring him that he is going to do absolutely everything necessary to make him win this battle that he actually deserves. When Mike insists that he lost the fight fair and square, Don bursts into anger, saying he does not want to hear any of this losing talk under any circumstances.
You did not lose. I don't want to hear that kind of talk, that goddamn defeatist attitude.
Mike then returns home to see Camille. There, he chit-chats with her about the good old days and their shared memories. A year passes by, and Mike travels to Indianapolis, where he is going to be part of the Miss Black America pageant. Mike, along with his friends, goes to see the contestants, and being addicted to his old habits and impulses, he finds himself noticing yet another girl named Desiree Washington. That evening, he calls her up and manages to convince her to go out to a party with him. He compliments her on her dress and eventually takes her to his room instead of going to the party. This sequence of events leads to Tyson being put on trial for raping Desiree Washington. He is convicted of the crime and is sentenced to 6 years in prison at the Indiana Youth Center. Later, in 1989, Robin and Tyson finalize their divorce settlement. The following year, Kevin files a civil lawsuit for damages against Tyson in 1989, but the case never goes to trial and is never heard in court. Mike is finally released in 1995, where he announces that he will attempt a comeback in his boxing career. Don King continues to act as his promoter. However, he himself is scheduled to stand trial for insurance fraud in May of 1995.